Welcome to video 9 of 14. Before I begin this video, I want to encourage survivors to use caution while watching this. The rest of this series until the last day. The last day is going to be question and answers, so that last video will be just question and answers. But up until then, it's going to be pretty intense, these videos. So I ask you to please use caution if you're a survivor. I'm going to go into very deep discussions about ritualistic abuse, about trafficking, and the things that I went through personally. These are my personal testimonies. Some of them may include testimonies from other people. If I include those, I will let you guys know that that's not my testimony. But everything that I share, unless I couple it with saying that it was somebody else, these are things that I went through myself. I just want you to use caution. This is very hard for me to do these videos, especially this part, because the first part was informational. This is stuff that relates directly to my life, and I've shared a little bit, but I'm going to share in graphic detail stuff that I've been through for the last 35 years. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Epps Banana. I am a Christian pastor. I am a survivor of ritualistic abuse, sex trafficking, kidnapping. I've gone through targeted gang stalking. I've been falsely imprisoned. I've been smeared. I've had some really horrific things happen to me. I've been horrendously bullied. I've had horrific things happen to me in my life, all because of my bloodline and because I refuse to deny Jesus and because I refuse to join the occult. These are my testimonies. These are firsthand experiences. Like I said, if I talk about anybody else's story, I will say that it's somebody else's story, but stuff that I'm sharing with you right now is my own personal stories. So today, this is video 8, and I'm going to, actually, I think it's video 9, actually. Yeah, it's video 9, actually. Sorry, not video 8. I'm going to talk to you about my history. This is a brief overview of what I've been through for the last 35 years. I'm going to go in more detail about naming names of my abusers and giving more details about the gang stalking and the torment that I've gone through, more in detail over the next couple videos. But this is my brief overview, just to kind of get you guys to understand where I've come from so I can explain to you at length about the stuff that I've been through in more details. So I was born into a multi-generational line of Luciferians. My biological bloodline comes from the Collins family. The Collins family, for those of you who know about the Illuminati, is top 13 families. The Collins family is actually in the top 4 families of the top 13 families. The top 4 families are the Rothschilds, the Collins, the Rockefellers, and the Kennedys. And those of you who don't know much about ritualistic abuse or about bloodliners, if you're born into the top 13 families, especially the top 4 families, you are targeted pretty much from the time you're born. You have a target on you, and the people in the occult start abusing you from the time that you're a newborn, basically. My abuse started when I was an infant. I was abused from the time I was an infant. I had a very, very rocky, hard life, my friends. This is a very trying video to share these things over the next couple of videos, but I just want you guys to know I'm being vulnerable and I'm sharing my story because I want to help people. And I hope that there's somebody out there that can get help from my videos, that they can have help and they can have restoration in their lives. So I was trafficked a lot of parts of my life. I was sexually assaulted a lot of my life. I was ritualistically abused. There were things that I didn't even realize until later on that I even put together that they were all connected. So many of the things are very, very strong. So many of the things that I've gone through are very intense. But I know that my story can help other people, and I know I'm not the only victim out there. I've ministered to hundreds of ritualistic abuse survivors and hundreds of trafficking victims. There's hundreds of thousands, probably millions of us out of there. And I am just sharing my story. So I was born into a ritualistic abuse family, the Collins family. From infancy, I started getting abused. I got put into foster care because my biological sperm donor was an abuser, and I guess they found out about, I don't know much about my very beginning of my life, just that there's some abuse that happened to me when I was a little girl, when I was an infant. And then I was put into foster care. I was abused in the foster care system, as most people are. The foster care, for those of you who don't know, a lot of the foster care system, not all of it, but a lot of it is a cover for child sex trafficking and for ritualistic abuse. There's a lot of Luciferians and child abusers that are foster families. Again, not all of it. There are good foster families out there, but it's very rare. And then when I was about a year to a year and a half old, I was adopted by a spirit-filled Christian family. So I'm really thankful because I had an amazing family that I grew up with, great parents, but they couldn't stop the abuse because I was a bloodliner. So from my entire childhood, I was abused by multiple people, not my parents. My parents are amazing people. My parents did everything they could to protect me, but they didn't know what was going on. When I was 3, especially after I got saved when I was 3, I started to get sexually assaulted a lot by different people at churches, different people at schools, extended family members, different people who were involved in stuff. Again, not my family. My parents are wonderful people, but there was other people, a lot of other people involved. When you're a ritualistic abuse survivor, you have a target on you. And some of the people that abuse you are not in the cult. A lot of them are. They're cult or cult adjacent, meaning that they work with people in the occult. Sometimes it's just people that see this traumatized child that they think they can use and abuse. A lot of predators, a lot of pedophiles see children that have been abused already, and they see them as weak, or that no one's going to believe them, or that there's something wrong with them, and that they're easy targets. They pick on easy targets. Predators are very cunning people. They know exactly what to look for. So I started getting sexually abused a lot when I was a child. And then I ended up, from the time I got saved when I was 3, I gave my life to the Lord. When I was 4, I started to preach at grocery stores and at restaurants. I was always sharing Jesus with people. I just wanted people to know the love of Jesus because I had this radical relationship with Jesus at that time. And I believe that my relationship with Jesus is the only thing that kept me going. Again, if you're not religious, I'm not trying to preach at you. I am a pastor. That's what my passion is Jesus. I know there's people watching this that are not religious, but that's what my passion is. And I believe that everything that I've been through has drawn me closer to Jesus, but I'm not trying to force Christianity down your throat or anything because I'm just sharing my personal testimony. This is how my life has been. I don't think without having my personal relationship with Jesus, I'd be here right now. He gave me the strength to overcome the trauma and the abuse that I've been through. Doesn't mean he took the pain away because I still have a lot of pain with it. But in that middle of the place, it says in Psalm 34:18, it says that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and a contrite spirit he does not despise. So when you're broken and when you're a victim of severe abuse, the Lord comes and he encounters you with his love. And he wants to do that for everybody. He wants to pour out his love for people who've been hurting, for people who've been broken, who've been abused, who've been traumatized. So when I was 5, I went to a Christian school. My parents thought they could trust that school. They didn't know. That Christian school was at a Baptist church, and I was ritualistically abused there. The pastor was actually a Freemason, and he ritualistically abused me and some of the other people that worked with him, his wife, and a couple other people that were on staff there, molested me and raped me repeatedly, sexually assaulted me. They told me that, if I denied Jesus as my savior, that they would stop raping me, and I told them I would never do that. So this continued for my kindergarten and first grade year. They were threatening my parents, so I didn't tell my parents what was going on. There was one time I remember when I was in a car with my mom when I was 6 years old, and I looked at my mom and I wanted to tell her so badly what was happening to me. I wanted to tell her that I was being raped and molested. But when you're that age, you don't have the words to describe what's happening to you. Predators know that children don't have the words to describe what they're going through. It's really hard to talk about at that age. It's hard to talk about as an adult. Here I am 30 years later because I'm 35, almost 36 years old. So that was almost 30 years ago. And I still have a hard time talking about it because the trauma is just so painful and the memories are so painful. And any victim, survivor of abuse, of any kind of abuse, not just sexual or ritualistic, but any kind of abuse will tell you childhood trauma affects you the rest of your life. You can heal from it. You can get restored. You can use your voice as a voice, but it still hurts. So at 5 and 6, I was being abused and raped and molested at a private Christian school by the pastor and his wife and by a couple other people. They were Luciferians. They were involved in the occult. They were not true Christians. There's a lot of people in the church today that are not true Christians. They're not truly followers of Christ. They claim to be pastors, but they're actually working for the occult. And that's what my situation was. When I was 6 years old, the pastor ritualistically abused me, and he called in some other people from other places. I don't even know who those people were, to be honest with you, because I never recognized them. I never saw them again. But they must have been some of his fellow Mason members or fellow Luciferians. I don't know. And he put me through a ritual where he actually married me, quote unquote, to Lucifer and to some false gods. He did this ceremony. Once again, he told me, he's like, deny Jesus or you're going to be tormented by demons the rest of your life, basically. And I said, I don't want anything to do. I want to follow Jesus. And so I chose Jesus, but in the midst of that, I was forced into this marriage ceremony with Lucifer and the false gods, which caused me so much torment throughout my life because that made me even bigger target to the people in the cult because they thought that they owned me. They thought Lucifer owned me because of this marriage ceremony. I never did anything willingly. I never willingly married, quote unquote, myself to Lucifer. I was married to him unwillingly, but it caused me a lot of pain in my life because the people in the cult knew that I was a bloodliner, and then they knew that about this ritual, and they thought that Lucifer owned me and that the cult owned me because of the because of my bloodline and because of this ritual that was done to me. So the abuse continues. I switched schools right when I'm in second and third grade. I switched schools. I really thought it'd get better. Again, I could not talk to my parents about this because the abuse was too bad and my parents' lives were being threatened. And honestly, I didn't have the words to say it. Like I said, I was in the car with my mom that one day and I wanted so badly to tell her about that I was being abused. I wanted so badly to tell her that I was being hurt and mistreated and that I was being raped. Of course, I didn't have the words for it, but I wanted so badly to tell them that they were hurting me and I didn't have the words for it. But when I saw my mom was sick at the time. And one of the things that one of the abusers said to me is, if you tell your mom because she's sick, she's going to die. Like, of course, these predators use that as against children. And so this predator, he said to me, he was like, if you tell your mom that we're raping and molesting you, basically, I mean, he didn't use those words, but what we're doing to you, which was rape and molestation. When he said, what we're doing to you, then your mom's going to die. And so I believed that because I was only 6 years old at the time. And so when this happened to me, I said I had this happen and then I switched schools, never told my mom. Up until the time I was 20, I never told my parents about my abuse at all. I just was too traumatized and had been through way too much. And it's been 15 years now where they've been trying to help me heal. And there's been ongoing abuse off and on my whole life, even up until a year and a half ago. So I'm going to keep sharing some of my story here. Again, I'm going to share more in detail about names of famous people and exactly what I went through more in detail over the next couple of days. But this is just a general overview of my life. So when I was 7 and 8, I went to a public school, and the principal and the assistant principal and my teacher and a cafeteria worker and the nurse were all involved in it. And there was a couple other people involved, but they were all 5 handling me and trafficking me and raping me. I found on later on, I didn't even realize I was being trafficked at the time. I found out later on that they were actually making money off of sexual assault. There was times where other people would come in, people that they would bring in to molest me and to rape me. And I guess they were selling me to these people. I didn't realize it at the time. I found out later on that they were making money off of selling me for sex, for rape, for child abuse. When I was a little girl, from the times I was 7 to 8, they were trafficking me at school. And I didn't know that. I just knew I was being assaulted. I knew that people were coming in. There was times where I'd be called into the principal's office and they would take me places. 2 times they actually took me off campus. After, like, in the middle of school, they took me off campus for a couple hours and they tried to, I guess they were selling me. I mean, I didn't realize at the time what was happening because I was so young, but now I realized that I was being sold, and I was told later on by people who have investigated them that actually found out, and I've had it confirmed by other people that I was actually being sold for sex. I didn't realize it at the time because I was so young. I just thought these people were hurting me. I didn't realize they were getting money for it, but they were. So, I'm sorry, this is a hard topic to talk about, so just give me a moment, please. So when I was being molested and raped at this school, the principal and the teacher and assistant principal and the nurse, they were all involved. There were other people involved. They would bring people in and they would take me off campus twice and they would traffic me to other people. And I don't remember, like, who all trafficked me at that point, but I know that there was at least 10 other people that I remember that molested or raped or did something sexual to me. They also put me through intense torment. Like, there was one time when I was taken somewhere, and I don't really know where it was at, to be honest with you, because, like I said, I was young and I couldn't comprehend what was going on. And they actually had somebody that was involved with the military. And this is when it started with the stuff with the military. I'm going to share with you guys a lot about the American military. I'm not saying that everybody in the military is bad, because there's a lot of people in the military that are actually really good people. But there is a very high level of trafficking going on in the Department of Defense and in the Pentagon and in the military right now. And they need to be exposed just like every other predator. So there was a military person then when I was 7 years old, when I was taken off campus, and this person raped me, and this person actually tried to get me to shoot a gun. Now, I'm 7 years old at the time. This is one of my biggest memories from my childhood. They tried to get me to shoot a gun. They were trying to get me to take part in seeing a murder of somebody. I actually witnessed a murder of somebody that day, and that traumatized me to no end. But again, I couldn't understand or comprehend what I was going through because I was so young at the time. This is very common for ritualistic abuse victims. A lot of people who are victims of ritualistic abuse, from the time they're children, they have to witness murders. They have to witness the deaths of other people. They might even have to take part in a murder when they're babies or when they're little kids. This is very common, guys. The occult is very, very disgusting what they do to children. So I had to witness this, and I remember for years after that, because I had no words to describe what happened to me that day. It was so traumatizing. I think he wanted me to like learn how to shoot the gun so I would take part in it, but I was not taking part in it. I just was there and the things happened. And I'm sorry, this is a really hard topic for me to discuss. I don't talk much about this part of my testimony, but it was really hard that day. And I was heartbroken. And for years after that, I remember I looked at my hands and I would see blood on my hands, even though I'm not the one that killed anybody, but I was there and I felt so guilty, even though I was only 7 years old. And I saw blood on my hands. And I was like, in the spirit, I was just like envisioning this because I was so traumatized. And I just feel heartbroken about what happened that day. And I wish I could have told somebody, but I was so young, you know. I don't know where I was at. I don't know who did this. I was just a little kid. So I'm not responsible for anything. It was just something that I witnessed, but there was no way I could tell anybody. This is very common with ritualistic abuse survivors. So finally after that, I started to really act up. I started to have tantrums. I started to have things where I couldn't verbalize what I was going through. I started to beat myself up. I would throw myself against the floor or against the walls, and I was like crying out in pain. And my parents were trying to get the answer out of me of what was going on. They were trying to get me to admit what was going on. And I said, I can't. I said, I don't know. I mean, like, I didn't say this to them, but this is what I'm thinking. I'm like, I don't know how to explain it to them. How do I explain this to them? You know, because I was a little girl at the time. I didn't say that to them, but that's what I was thinking. And there's other parts of my testimony that, you know, like are kind of tied to that I'm not going to go into detail about at the moment. I might in the future, but I don't feel like it's safe right now to talk about other parts of that. But the important thing is that my parents were trying to understand what was going on. But the stuff that was happening at the school was way too overwhelming. And my parents tried for years to figure out what was going on, but they showed me love and compassion through that whole thing. And I was so grateful for them. But they had no idea what I was going through. They had no idea what I was going through because I was being told at both schools that if I told my parents, if I talked, that I would be killed, or that I would be killed, or that my parents would be killed. And I really believed it because my mom was sick at the time, and I really thought that they were going to kill her. I found out later on that they actually poisoned my mom once. Somebody that was connected to this trafficking ring of the school that I went to actually put some poison in my mom's food, tried to kill my mom. I think they thought that I was telling my parents what was going on, which is ridiculous because if they would have told my parents what was going on, I would have been pulled out of school in a nanosecond. My parents would never have left that. And we would have had a massive lawsuit investigation into it. But they thought that I was talking to my parents, I guess. And so they actually put poison in my mom's food. Tried to kill my mom, actually. Tried to kill my dad. There were attempts even at that age on my family's life. And I was so overwhelmed with all this trauma in me from the trauma that I was going through. And this is like nothing compared to what I've gone through as an adult or when I got older. This is just ongoing stuff that I went through as a child that continued to mess with my head and continued to break me. But in this time of breaking, I kept having this amazing relationship with Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. He's my everything. And at 7 years old, I had a vision and I was called into full-time ministry. I had a vision and the Lord said to me, he showed me speaking in front of the hundreds of thousands of people that looked Middle Eastern and Asian, and it was at a big crusade. And he's like, I'm calling you as an evangelist and a revivalist. I didn't even know what the term revivalist was back then. Now, granted, my parents and I, all three of us were spirit-filled Christians. My parents knew, I've heard the word revivalist, but I didn't comprehend it at the time at 7 years old. I just heard this in my spirit. And he's like, you're going to win millions of souls into my kingdom. And that's what I've stood by since then. And he's like, that's what your calling is. So like I said earlier, you know, I was 4 years old when I started preaching the gospel to people at schools or at churches and at grocery stores and at restaurants. And I was 4 years old when I started doing that, and I never stopped. A lot of my abuse when I was between the ages of 5 to 8, like a lot of times these principals and pastors and teachers that were involved, like I said, the pastor was not a true Christian. He was a Mason, but these people were supposedly presenting themselves as good people, you know, and that pastor supposedly was a Christian, but he wasn't. But they actually told me over and over again, like, if you just deny Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, we'll stop hurting you. We'll leave your family alone. We'll leave you alone. This will stop. And I was like, no, I'm never going to deny Jesus. I don't know how many times as a child I said that. I said that numerous times. I was being persecuted even from a young age for following Christ because of my bloodline. So then I got pulled out of school at 8 years old. Because what happened was, well, there were two major events that made my parents pull me out of school. Now, they didn't know any of this stuff until I was 20. I never told my parents about any of this stuff until I was 20 because it was just way too overwhelming. But the two main events that caused my parents to pull me out of school is the one day, the teacher that was abusing me, she was putting me through this torture where she wouldn't let me go to the bathroom. And for those of you who are survivors of abuse, a lot of a common thing about childhood abuse is that children have to use the restroom a lot. That's a common thing. That's a common sign that someone's being abused. Not always. Sometimes it could just be a bladder infection, things like that. But I had to use the restroom a lot. And I know a lot of victims of childhood abuse do have to use the bathroom a lot. And those that do have to use the restroom a lot of times they that's one of the main signs. Bedwetting, things like that are signs of childhood abuse. Both of which I had. There's other signs, of course, and that doesn't always have to mean that there's sexual assault happening, but it is very common. So I had to use the restroom a lot, and my teacher was like, because I think she knew that those were signs of sexual abuse, and she was punishing me for having to use the restroom. So the one day I actually had an accident in class because she refused to let me go to the bathroom, and she made me sit in it, and I was embarrassed in front of everybody the whole day. And it was just disgusting. I smelled. It was absolutely horrible. And then one time, she taught these false doctrines where she was telling everybody in this class to pray to trees. We had to sit around and pray to trees. I said, I'm not going to pray to trees. I follow Jesus Christ. I'm not going to pray to a tree. I don't pray to trees. And she got really mad and she threatened me. And then I got assaulted later on, because of that incident. And so my parents didn't know about the assault. They just knew about the actual event leading up to it. So this is why I got pulled out of school. Got put into homeschooling when I was 9, from 4th grade to 9th grade. I was homeschooled. In that time, the first couple years, things slowed down for me. I wasn't getting attacked. But then we moved to Pennsylvania, and I was sexually assaulted by somebody when I was 11. And I actually got pregnant, and I had a miscarriage when I was 11 years old. Very, very young, I know, but this happened to me. And I had this miscarriage, and I had no idea what I was going through. At the time, I was still playing with toys. So it was like, not only was I already being sexually assaulted a lot, but here I was, 11 years old, I got pregnant, and I had a miscarriage. So these are things that I had to go through. And then I just started this, and I talked about this earlier at our conference, just started to really press in for the baptism of the Holy Spirit. Got the baptism of the Holy Spirit when I was 11, and then, but I only got the gifts of words of knowledge and discernment of spirits, but I didn't understand, because I grew up Assembly of God, so I was taught that you had to speak in tongues in order to be baptized in the Holy Spirit. I didn't speak in tongues, so I didn't have the understanding that that was what we had. I didn't understand that I was really baptized in the Holy Spirit. So for the next 4.5 years, I dealt with this warfare in my mind where it was like constantly like, you're going to hell, God hates you, you're going to hell, God hates you, all these bad things happen to you, this happened to you and that happened to you, and all this warfare in my mind. It was just constant torment for 4.5 years. And this put me down a really long spiral connected to that one event of having a miscarriage at 11. It connected to that event. It put me down this spiral of spiritual warfare and attacks of the enemy, and just feeling overwhelmed. And again, for those of you watching this that are not Christians, who are just, regular people, like, I'm not trying to preach at you. I'm just sharing my testimony. I'm sharing spiritual parts of it, and also my abuse part, because they go hand in hand. Like, a lot of the stuff I've been through has been because of my relationship with God. I've been persecuted a lot for being a Christian because the occult does not want me to be a Christian, and they are, the Luciferians hate Jesus. And so that's why I'm sharing some of these things. This is mostly about my abuse and about my past, but I also want to share my spiritual aspect of things as well, because it goes hand in hand in my mind. If you're not a believer, this is things that I believe. I'm not trying to force religion down your throat, but Jesus does love you, and I do believe that. So I'm just sharing my testimony with you guys. This is what I've been through. And a lot of my testimony is very, very dark. I've been through a lot of dark things, but my relationship with God's been the only thing to bring me through these dark times. So anyhow, I started to go through intense gang stalking around that same time. I started to go to churches, was bullied at churches, having people come to my house, parked outside my house, calling my house, threatening me, all kinds of insane things. Now, granted, I was 11 years old at this time. This started when I was about 11. Same time that I had the miscarriage. Same time that I started to go through all this stuff. And I had no idea what was going on. So I get this phone call when I'm 11 years old to our house, and I'm inside of our house. And this was one of the creepiest things that ever happened to me, guys. This is insane. I was 11 years old, and I get this phone call. And my mom and dad were out for a walk, and I answer the phone call, and this guy's like, he says my name, and then he said, I know your father. And I thought he meant my dad that I grew up with, my dad that adopted me, the spirit-filled Christian that was always supporting me and loving me, just like my mom was, But he was actually talking about my sperm donor. And he's like, I'm like, well, he's not out right now. He's like, I'm not talking about him. He's like, I'm talking about your biological father, who I refuse to call my biological father, call him like sperm donor, because he doesn't deserve the title father. But anyhow, he's like, I know what you're wearing right now. I know everything about you. He described my outfit like verbatim. Like, he was actually watching me, and it freaked me out. It was the first time that I really got freaked out by the gang stalkers. He was, I would say, probably the first person to openly admit that he was stalking me. And again, I was 11 years old at this time. I don't know who this man was. To this day, I still don't know where that phone call came from. He described my outfit perfectly. It freaked me out. I ran upstairs. I was so scared. I was like, I can't even tell you how scared I was. When my parents came home, I told them what happened, and my parents were scared. There was no way to trace the phone call. I think it was came from a blocked number. It was really scary. So things like that started to happen. I started to get people parked outside of our house. I started to have weird phone calls. We started to have people following us around. I started to go through a lot of weird, really weird things. At the same time, I was feeling depressed, and I started to self-harm, and I developed an eating disorder, all tied to the miscarriage that I had, or so I thought at the time. Some of it was warfare. But then on the top of that, all these things started happening at different places. I'd go from church to church, and I'd get bullied and mistreated. I'd have pastors like condemn me and threaten me. I have leaders at churches, just all these different people, just everywhere I went, like different groups that I went to, everybody turned on me, and I didn't understand it. And, then I just felt like I was alone, and I felt really rejected, and I felt really ashamed. And so then I was like, why am I being treated like this? And then it wasn't until, almost a decade later that I started to find out that this gang stalking that began when I was 11, and really it didn't happen my whole life, because my childhood was full of gang stalking as well. And so, it was like the gang stalking and the abuse went hand in hand, and it was the occult doing this. Now, some of the people were, and as I talked about earlier about the sex trafficking ring, it goes from the sex traffickers, those who buy children and buy the victims, to, so it's the sex traffickers, those that buy the victims, and then there's the people that work for the sex traffickers behind the scenes. They're the ones that are getting paid to stalk people, to threaten people, to harass people. Those people may or may not actually be traffickers, may or may not actually be buying people, but they're working for them. So in my mind, they're just as guilty as the actual traffickers and abusers. So that's what I started to deal with. I started to deal with this huge network of gang stalkers, which I'll talk about more in detail in one of my upcoming videos. But this started when I was 11. I mean, like I said, it started as a child, but it really got crazy when I was 11. And everywhere I went, churches, everywhere, it was just like constant harassment, bullying, threats, death threats, condemnation, just insane. And I was not doing anything. I just would walk into a place and people would just start to harass me to no end. And then I found out later on that this was all tied to my gang stalking, and that the gang stalking was all tied to the sex trafficking ring, and the sex trafficking ring was tied to my bloodline. And I found this out years later. But for years, I didn't understand why I was being so mistreated. So I went to high school when I was 14. I went to a public high school, and those were some of the worst years of my life. I was tormented there. I had people threatening to rape me there. I had death threats. I had people actually putting bomb threats against the school just because of me. I had people trying to have me killed just because I was a Christian. Like, this is the stuff that I had to deal with as a child and as a teenager, and I had no idea how to handle it. So I just took more and more down, I just went more and more down the path of self-harm cutting, developed an eating disorder. It just was like the only way that I could handle the pain that I was going through. And I had my relationship with Jesus, but my mind was so messed up at the time. I'm like, I'm going to hell. God hates me, this, that, and this. And then it was just this battle that I had to go through. So fast forward, I'll talk more about the gang stalking, the bullying in another video. I'm just kind of touching on things right now. But fast forward to the time I was 17, and I just couldn't take the torment anymore. I got to my end of my rope, and I attempted suicide when I was 17. And I said, Lord, I'm like, I love you, but I just can't handle it anymore. And you know what happened? Like, I felt like I was out of my body. I did not die, guys. And I don't think I was near death either, but I had a weird out of body type experience. And I heard God say to me, he's like, your time here is not done. I still have work for you. And then he put me back into my body, and I came, I didn't die. I wasn't like dying. It was just this out of body experience because I took a bunch of pills and I mixed a bunch of stuff to try to kill myself. And after that, it was like I was free from the mental torment, but the bullying and the harassment continued. So fast forward another year, I graduate high school, and I start my ministry full time in March 2009. So it's almost been 17 years. In a couple weeks, it'll actually be 17 years. No, it was actually, it should be March. I think it's the end of the month. It was like March 28th or something that I started my ministry, 2009. And I was been in full-time ministry for almost 17 years. Soon as I started my ministry, the gang stalking went insane. So I first got contacted by a senator. I'm going to name his name here because he's dead, and I'm going to talk about the naming names here in a couple days. I'm just giving you a brief overview, but for those of you who know who John McCain is, he ran for president back in 2008. He was the first person that was famous that I knew of. Now, I found out later on that there were other people involved in my gang stalking, but he's the first person that I know of that actively started to harass me. I got death threats from John McCain personally. He threatened to kill me. He threatened to rape me. The guy was an absolute lunatic. I don't know why he was going after me, except that he was in the occult and he was trying to get more power. After Barack Obama won the presidency, I guess John McCain was angry, and he was angry that he didn't get in because he was involved with the Masonic. So he started harassing me, and I really don't know why. And it was at that point that I started to realize how vast this network was and how vast the gang stalking was. And again, I'm going to go more into detail and name names later on in my next couple videos and talk more in detail about the stuff, but I'm giving you a brief overview. So John McCain was the first person that was a senator that I dealt with, and he used to just send me death threats. He would send me rape threats. The guy was completely unhinged. And so he was harassing me for about at least a year and a half, I would say. And I tried to get away from him. He kept contacting me. No matter how many times I got away from him, he was contacting me. He was paying people to harass me. He started paying people money to harass me. And it was all because he wanted to power up, I guess. And he was mad. So because of the occult, because he didn't win the presidency. And I guess he wanted to power up in the occult, and he was mad that he didn't. So I guess somebody told him, well, if you go after Hepsi, you'll power up because she's a Christian and she's a bloodliner. And I don't really even know why he started targeting me, to be honest with you. But that started the 15 years of intense warfare. 16 years, actually. It was 16 years. No, 15, because it just ended last year to this point. It started 15 years of intense warfare from 2009 to 2025, where I was being gang stalked. I got kidnapped. I was being trafficked. I was held hostage, and I was raped by over 60 celebrities and politicians trafficked me. Out of those, there were probably dozens more who gang stalked me. Some of them were crossovers. They trafficked and raped me and gang stalked me. Some of them were just gang stalkers. I started going through this intense harassment from people in the occult, and they were all tied to the worldwide sex trafficking ring. So some of these celebrities and politicians were not actual traffickers themselves. Some of them were just being paid to torment me and to abuse me and to threaten me. I was having people paying to do insane things, trying to have me killed, trying to poison my dog. My one dog actually did get poisoned. They actually went after my dog. My dog ended up dying, my first dog. And I found out later on that it was tied to all this stuff. Tried to poison me, tried to poison my new dog, Pequeño, the one that I have now. They killed a bird outside my house. They did some horrible things. They tried to have me killed. They tried to blow up things because I was going a place. Like all these things that they went through. Tried to have me kidnapped numerous times. It was insane, guys. For 15 years, it was an insane level of gang stalking. I was kidnapped. I was trafficked. I was raped. And I was assaulted by so many people. It was insane. And so I went through this for years, and I find out that all this is tied to my bloodline because I'm a bloodliner. And I didn't know anything about bloodlines when I was younger, but now I do. So if you're born into the top 13 families in the Illuminati, you already have a mark on you because of your bloodline. They believe that those top 13 families should rule the world, and that everybody that's connected to the top 13 families should be an Illuminati Luciferian. They wanted me to be a Luciferian. They wanted me to become a handler. They wanted me to even run for politics one day. This was what they wanted for my destiny for me, but I didn't want anything to do with that. I've always wanted to follow Jesus Christ. Never wanted anything to do with the occult. But because of that, I've been persecuted and tormented my whole life for it. And can't tell you how many times these people in the cult have tried to get me to deny Jesus. They've tried to get me to turn my back on God and say, I'm not going to follow Jesus. I've never done that. And it's intense. It's very, very intense, especially when you're being abused and traumatized. And so I went through years of every part of my life being ruined. I was smeared. I got kidnapped. I was being held hostage. I was raped. I was trafficked. Anything under the sun that you can imagine. I had attempts on my life. You name it. I had dozens of celebrities, dozens of politicians threaten me, threatened to rape me, threatened to kill me, try to put hits out on me, pay for hits on my life. I had dozens of celebrities and politicians traffic me and abuse me. These are the things that I've had to go through over the last 15 years. So most of my trafficking with celebrities has been as an adult. I do suspect that some of these people, I found out later on that some of the people that are celebrities and politicians have actually been tormenting me behind the scenes for a very long time, especially two of my top people that handled me and trafficked me, which I'm going to talk about more in depth over the next couple of days. But I didn't know it at the time that they were behind the scenes, but they were paying for things behind the scenes ever since I was a child to torment me and to make my life a living hell. So I've been through an absolute living nightmare, my friends. And in that middle of that nightmare, I have been abused by so many people. And I remember almost everything. There were times when I was drugged. There were times when I disassociated from the trauma where, like I could remember the beginning of the rape and the end of the rape and who did it, but not the middle of it, or the beginning of the torture and the end of the torture, who did it, but not the middle of the torture, because it's being disassociating. Anyone who's a victim of trauma will know what it's like to disassociate, where you kind of check out when you're being traumatized. But I remember the beginnings of the assaults and the ends, and I do remember most everything in the middle, but there's a couple of things that I disassociated from during the actual middle part of the event, or I disassociated from, not disassociated from the middle of the event, or there are a couple times that I was drugged, so I can't really recall some things because they drugged me, but I can recall most everything that's happened to me, and it is a lot, my friends. So I'm doing these videos because I want people to know what's going on. So over the next couple of videos, I am going to name my gang stalkers. I'm going to tell you who threatened me, who tried to have me killed. I'm going to name names. I'm not going to name every name. There's people that have been involved in this that I've been asked not to name. And there's a couple people that I'm not going to name that used to be gang stalkers of mine, but they were being forced to gang stalk me by their own handlers. They were survivors themselves. Some celebrities and politicians, people that are well known, that actually flipped privately and publicly, some of them too. But I'm not going to name their names because they actually were being forced and coerced into doing things to me. So I'm not going to name those people's names. And then there's a couple people I've been asked not to name, but I am going to name a lot of people connected to my gang stalking. I'm going to name the death threats I got, the rape threats, who threatened me, why they threatened me. I'm going to name my rapists and my traffickers. Again, not everybody, but I'm going to name a lot of these names. I am doing this to help other victims, for victims all over the world, because there are thousands and thousands of people who've been trafficked by the elite. There are thousands and thousands of people who've been gaslit, who've been manipulated, who have been kidnapped, who have been abused by the elite, and I want the truth to come out. There are victims every day that are still being trafficked by the elite that have no voice. I want to be the voice for the hopeless. I'm trying to get justice in my own life. I'm trying to work with law enforcement to get my own justice. I've been working with them for a couple years. But even if I never get my justice publicly, I want other people to know that they're not alone. These people are evil, they're vile, and they deserve to be exposed. Jesus loves every single soul. Some of the people on my list that I have, I actually led them to the Lord. They actually got saved. But it doesn't excuse their actions, and they still need to go to prison for the crimes they've committed against me and against countless others. And it's important for you guys to know that if someone rapes one person, if someone traffics one person, they're not the only victim. Multiple people in the Epstein files trafficked me and connected to multiple people in the trafficking, multiple people in the Epstein files. For instance, some of the names are not in the Epstein files, but they're connected to those people via the work that they do, or they're friends with them, etc. These names are very high-profile people. They're politicians, they're celebrities, they're very, very high-profile people. Some of them may shock you, some of them may not, but this is my story, and I'm hoping that somebody out there hears these videos and somebody can get free and know that they are not alone. The elite traffic people in order to keep them silent. The elite traffic them in order to pleasure themselves and to make more money and to further the kingdom of darkness. But God says, thus far, no more. God says this is the time when there's full disclosure. And that's what we saw a couple weeks ago with the unveiling of the Epstein files. And I'm praying that it continues, and it continues, because have nothing to do with foolish deeds of darkness, but expose them to the light. So that's what I'm trying to do with these videos. So keep tuning in. I'm going to be making a couple more videos. This is video 9. I'm going up to 14, so I have 5 more videos to make. The last video is a question and answers. If you have any questions or any answers about what I'm talking about, you can message me or email me, info@theliontriumphs.com. Any questions, I'm going to do a video at the very end of this series with questions and answers. If anyone has any questions or answers about the occult, I'll answer you guys privately, but then I'll address it publicly if you want the question, to be known publicly. But I want you guys to know that You need to fight against the works of the enemy. You need to fight against the abuse. You need to fight against the traffickers, and you need to expose this stuff, guys. I don't mean become obsessed with it. Don't get burdened down with it. But do not let this slide. Do not let the traffickers get away with what they've done to children. Do not let the traffickers get away with what they did to unwilling adults like myself. Do not let them get away with what they did to animals. We need to expose these people because have nothing to do with foolish deeds in darkness, but expose it to the light. Not because we hate the people, but because there's victims that are still being abused and they deserve their justice. There's victims whose lives have been ruined, like myself and like some of my friends. We deserve our justice. Every victim who's been molested, raped, or assaulted on any level by elite people or by regular people deserve justice. You deserve your justice. You deserve your voice. And I am praying and I am believing that every single person who's been victimized by the worldwide sex trafficking ring like myself gets their justice. And I am believing that these people will pay for what they did to children and what they did to unwilling adults, what they did to animals, that they will pay for their crimes. And I'm believing that these men and women who violated me will be exposed publicly. Some of them, like I said, some of them I led to the Lord. That wasn't easy. There's nothing easy about praying for someone who rapes you, praying for someone who traffics you. There's nothing easy about showing the love of Christ to those people. And again, for those of you who don't believe in the Lord, this is just me because I'm a pastor. So I'm sharing my heart as a Christian pastor. This is what I've seen work for my own life, is showing love to people. And it's not easy. It doesn't mean I'm not angry, because I am really angry what happened to me. But it does mean that I see them as human beings who've been abused themselves. And they're continuing the cycle. The only difference between me and them, because most of those people are abuse victims themselves, I'm not continuing the cycle, and they are. It's time that there is full disclosure. And it's time that victims everywhere get their voices heard, and that they're no longer stifled by man, by woman, by powers that be, by the judges, by the court system, by the law. No more stifling at the top level of the government, by the executive branch. No more stifling by princes and kings and billionaires and millionaires, and by congressmen and Senate, by the DOD, by the CIA, by Blackwater, by Red Mossad, by any of these organizations. No more, no more. It is time that our voices are heard. And it's time that trafficking victims everywhere get their justice. So please, share this video. Encourage others to watch these videos. I'm just trying to get the word out. And join me for the next couple days, because I am going to go more in details and naming names and say exactly what happened to me. This was just kind of a general overview video. So be blessed, and I pray that you have a great